A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nassar. The Truthful Story of John Nash. English for You Culminating by Morgan Robinson. I believe that A Beautiful Mind told the truth about Nobel Prize recipient and genius mathematician John Nash. Let's talk about why. It is essential to understand the elements that give a text integrity. So, what factors make a biography legit? The 5 elements I learned throughout this course that are key factors to determining how truthful and credible a piece are include the date, information about the author, accuracy of the information, the purpose behind the piece, and if any bias was evident. Now I analyzed Nassar's novel keeping these features in mind. Let's begin with the date. A Beautiful Mind was published in 1998, but Nassar said it took her around 3 years to write. This is important because the date allows the reader to infer as to how Nassar got her information. The internet was first released to the public in 1991. When Nassar was writing her book, the internet would have still been a very new concept, so I can confidently assume that she got her information from typically more reliable sources like books, research papers, and even primary sources like those who knew Nash himself. Moving on, it's equally important to know about the author. Nassar is currently working as a professor of business journalism at Columbia University. The university's website displays her impressive resume of working as a New York Times economics correspondent for 8 years and being a journalist for several different publications. All of this easily reveals her experience, and experience is key. One should note that Nassar is writing about what she knows. A Beautiful Mind discusses economics heavily, and she wrote about John Nash, a man who quickly became one of the most influential ideas of the 20th century, transforming the young science of economics. Her clear understanding allowed her to communicate her thoughts effectively, making her book both true and successful. However, the successfulness of the book means nothing if the information isn't accurate. So Nassar's book is riddled with superscripts that allow readers to find the source of the information she used to tell the story of John Nash. I picked Note 43 out at random to get a sense for what kind of sources she was using. The Natural History of Mania, Depression, and Schizophrenia is a book based on a research study, which certainly sounds much more credible than a Google search or general statement, doesn't it? As well, I think it's important to mention the fact that the novel lacked any sensory information or imagery, and this is actually significant because Nassar was not there to describe the scenery, nor is it important to telling the story. This minor detail proves that she places emphasis on the facts. And lastly, we can assume that most of the information Nassar received about Nash was from a primary source, either by interviewing Nash himself or those who knew him. Remember, she wasn't just telling a story, she was telling his story. The purpose behind the novel is key as well. In an interview on CBC, Nassar said that writing a New York Times article about the mathematician ultimately inspired her novel. She used words like uplifting and inspiring to describe his life. Nassar also discussed the impact that women play as caregivers and wanted to acknowledge their efforts and contributions because of the significant impact they have on one's life. Specifically, the impact Alicia had on Nash. One thing is very clear. Nassar was not motivated by money, which is made obvious by her interest in economics and the inspiration behind the book. Had she wanted to profit heavily from this book, she would have just portrayed John Nash differently, not as himself, in an attempt to appeal to readers more, sacrificing the novel's integrity. The last key feature is bias. In an interview on CBC, Nassar said that her and Nash only became friends after the book had been published, and that he refused to give formal interviews, making him very difficult to work with, just like he was in the book. This is important because it helped Nassar to remain neutral about Nash, so that she could present him as he was, both the good and bad sides of him. An example of Nash's good qualities would be that he tried his best to keep in contact with his first son. He always had him in his thoughts. For bad, however, he was often arrogant and would belittle others whom he viewed as less competent and academically inferior. But he was presented equally and neutrally, allowing the reader to form their own opinion about him, proving the lack of bias in the text, as it wasn't obvious as to Nassar's opinions of him. To wrap everything up, I think that Sylvia Nassar's A Beautiful Mind is a biography with integrity. She's a credible author who wrote about a man whose story inspired her to share it with the world. And that's why I believe that this biography is Integrity Certified. This Google Slides theme is licensed under Fair Use Agreement and was made by Slides Carnival. This concludes my culminating activity. Thank you for listening.